This is GovExec Daily, where we bring you the federal stories that really matter. It's April 28th, 2023. I'm Roshan Fortune. 2 years ago, Joe Biden signed an executive order directing a reimagining of how the federal government encourages diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility among the federal workforce. In the order, the president directed agencies to establish or elevate Chief Diversity Officers. But the newness of these positions means that many agencies did not have an adequate pipeline of candidates for CDO positions. Training was arguably insufficient, and some were put into roles unprepared for the business and management questions that come with being a Chief Diversity Officer. Recently, Accenture Federal Services, in collaboration with the Partnership for Public Service, started the Chief Diversity Officer Bootcamp to bring credentials and training to Chief Diversity Officer candidates. Adam Jones is Talent and Human Potential Senior Manager in the Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity practice at Accenture, and Kevin Johnson is the Director at the Partnership for Public Service, where he leads the partnership's external diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility efforts across the organization. After a short break, they'll join me to talk about the Chief Diversity Officer Bootcamp and DEIA in government.
The process of navigating government contracting can be tedious and confusing, but it doesn't have to be with GovTribe, an all-in-one collaborative platform that gives you access to opportunity, award, and spending data related to the federal contracting market from all available government sources. Simplify the bid process and increase your P-win today with tools designed specifically for government contractors. Save time, know more, and win more with GovTribe. Start your free trial today at govtribe.com.
Diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility are principles that the Biden administration has brought forward since it came into office. In June of 2021, the president signed an executive order establishing a directive to agencies to seek opportunities to establish or elevate Chief Diversity Officers. Recently, Accenture Federal Services and the Partnership for Public Service launched the Chief Diversity Officer Bootcamp to provide agencies with more of a pipeline of public servants with the proper training. Adam Jones is a Talent and Human Potential Senior Manager in the Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity practice at Accenture. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
And Kevin Johnson is a Director at the Partnership for Public Service, where he leads the partnership's external diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility efforts across that organization. Welcome to the program.
Yeah, thank you for having me as well.
Tell me about the origins of the bootcamp program. How and why did it come about?
Well, right after the murder of George Floyd, we saw an increase in the need for chief diversity officers in what we found was originally in what we call the commercial space. Company in major markets and in major companies. There was a 55% increase in the space for people to lead this type of work. And so we also saw that in the federal space, there became, after the executive order 14035, this additional need to have individuals who were capable to take the helm in this area. And so there were multiple new opportunities that were popping up. We found that people who had decades of experience within the federal government and had lived experiences needed to also have the capabilities and the competencies to continue to move diversity and inclusion in the workplace. And so Accenture Federal Services, along with the Partnership for Public Service, saw this as an opportunity for us to build a boot camp that would address those needs. And so we came together in the October timeframe last year, and we're able to basing our coursework on ECQs, which are the executive core qualifications, as well as some what we found is some of the best practices from places like Cornell and George Mason. We're able to put together an 8-week program, which included 4 sessions and 2 virtual sessions. And so that's how it was born. And Kevin and I have the distinct honor and pleasure of being the first to ever to present this in the federal space.
I sort of gave a broad outline of what it's trying to accomplish, but more generally, what are the goals here? What are we trying to get for people to take out of this when they are participating in it?
Prior to Executive Order 14035, which was focusing on DIA and the federal workforce, some federal agencies had DIA officers or managers, but they were lower down in the agency, so they didn't have the same authority, the same power, the same resources as, for example, your Chief Human Capital Officer or someone else who focuses on talent and culture, which is at the heart of the Chief Diversity Officer role. And so, with that, as we understood, a lot of people were being elevated without possibly not truly understanding the scope of organizational development, understanding not only how to make change, but also to do it strategically and doing it intentionally. So part of this boot camp was really focusing on how can you elevate this role, and with that elevation is how can you be strategic in driving cultural change, and also how can you collaborate with your Chief Human Capital Officer to really hone in on identifying the best talent and as well as promoting the best talent within the agency.
There's a lot of agencies who need this training. They need this knowledge. Which agencies are participating in the boot camp now? What kind of feedback are you getting from them?
I mean, I can talk to the feedback. So, over the 8 weeks, we got great feedback around one, really helping the cohort to understand what it takes to be in the space. So like the evolution of D&I as a practice, giving them some true nuts and bolts around things like change management, their ability to understand what it means to be influencers, like around collaboration, being able to understand things like conflict resolution and mediation, different from your traditional conflict resolution and mediation, more around how do you do it from an inclusion standpoint, how to be coaches, how to think strategically, how to work through data and analytics to drive insights in the space. And so what we found is a lot of folks were really, really excited and happy to, one, just collaborate, right? Listen to the best practices across agencies. I often say in the commercial space, competing companies don't share secrets, but in the federal space, absolutely the D&I practitioners share those secrets because they want everybody to get better for the mission of serving the American people. So just being in the room together allowed them to share best practices, to share documents, to talk through some of their challenges, and to have us be facilitators of that work. So we got a lot of great feedback in that area.
This executive order from the Biden administration came forth for a reason. Where are agencies falling short of diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility? And what do CDOs sort of bring to that? Certainly provided through whatever education and training they can have.
Yeah, I would say one of the main challenges I hear from current TDOs is just the lack of resources. And you may hear the same thing in the private sector, is they are charged with a very daunting task, is to change culture. And the reason why culture change is often needed is because the more that people connect with each other, as well as their managers and leaders, the better they can really pull in the same direction in service to the American people. And so that's the number one thing, is in order for me to achieve this goal, the expectations of that I have of this role, I need more resource, I need more staff and things like that. A second thing that we see is also similar to the private sector, is just understanding the importance of DEIA principles and practices, understanding what does it mean to connect with other people, communicate effectively, to understand how important the sense of belonging and authenticity is to a person's ability to contribute their best self to doing the work, and how the more they can contribute their best selves to work, that obviously the more they can contribute also to the work at hand. So those are two big challenges that we see oftentimes, is the lack of resources, as well as understanding the importance of these DIA principles and practices.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, saying that I think the other one is structurally where to start. The majority, when you think about things like blockchain, or you think about 5G, there's all these principles that everybody agrees or drive them. When you look at D&I and specifically DEIA, everybody's starting from somewhere different, right? So somebody might be starting from the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Title VII. Somebody might be starting from neurodiversity. Somebody might be starting from dealing with our military veterans, or we may be dealing with accessibility. And so because so many people start from so many different places, depending on who the leadership is, depends on where that agency might start. And so even though the executive order outlines things that everyone should do, the challenge is to start where, right? Like, and so I think the biggest piece that we found, especially in the class where people found the most value, was around roadmap activities, change management activities. Like, how do you foundationally start in one place and move across a version of a maturity model? And so we kind of tried to hit that point home around making sure that you have priorities, right? Like every time there's another political appointee, the priority may change. Every time there's a new Chico put into place, the priority changes. And so as a chief diversity officer, they're kind of like the buoy in the water. They're responsible for being there, and they're floating no matter how the tide may ebb and flow or change. They're responsible for continuing to shine that light for people to follow towards or to move towards.
And I'll build off of what Adam just brought up too. Is like the varying starting points is we have to understand so many people are exposed to more diversity, whether it be race and ethnicity, whether it be gender identity, sexual orientation, and things like that in the workplace than they are in their homes. Because we've seen that from the Census 2020 as our neighborhoods are more segregated by both race and ethnicity as well as social identity, and even to a certain extent by political affiliations. That with these variations of standpoints and starting points is they come to the workplace and being asked to start at the same point without having someone facilitate and coach them in that space. That's why this role is so key and pivotal to organizations getting on the same page and again march in the same direction.
Well, you mentioned culture change, and it's something that I've thought about a lot. We had Janice Underwood on the show, the OPM DEIA director, and a question that she and I talked about was, how do you move from box checking to actual culture change? Because as you both have mentioned, I know this has been my experience in these things too, it can be very easy to feel condescending about this stuff if you are in a meeting with someone who's oftentimes voluntarily saying, I want to be better, but they may be coming from a different starting point. How does that move from just getting people in the tent and actually moving cultures of agencies, particularly from the perspective of the CDOs?
I'll say one of the things that we, especially talking to a number of the chief diversity officers who serve on our Chief Diversity Officer Council, is we need to stop talking about the business case for diversity and equity, inclusion, accessibility. We understand it is important. We understand it's part of civility. But the thing that I hear from a number of them is we need to start talking about the return on investment. Is what are agencies gaining by investing in this space? They're gaining better talent. They're gaining more impact because the teams are more intact. They feel more connected. There's more trust and belonging. So I think that's the biggest key is the more that chief diversity officers, the more the head of federal agencies themselves talk about the return on investment, the more they understand is what are you getting from what you're putting into it. So when you don't talk about what you get out of it, it's hard for people to put more into it.
Yeah, and Russ, to your point around box checking, I think, I often have said, it's important if you raise the floor, you get closer to the ceiling. A lot of times people say, well, I don't want it to be a box checking activity. Well, I'll say this, if enough people check the boxes and you create more boxes, you have more engagement. And I know it's a pragmatic way of looking at it, and it's not sexy, and it's not the heart, it's the head, right? Like what we often want is we want people to feel it in a way, to Kevin's point around the civility, right? Like you want it to be, because we're humans, that we recognize the value of each individual, and we want them to bring their best selves to work, and we want them to feel welcome, and we want them to feel like they belong. In the absence of that, in this space, if it means we're checking boxes, we should check more boxes, right? So if it means more training that everybody has to go to, even if you're sitting in it, it's like if you sit in a room long enough, you absorb some things in the room. It just means that we need to build in more capabilities that provide more Like, we call them key performance indicators, but a key performance indicator is nothing more than another version of a box that we check. It's just a box that we check that drives towards business results. So I'm a big fan, and it's kind of like, it's different for me, but I truly believe that if we can't get people to believe it in their hearts and in their minds and in their souls and spirits, then let's check more boxes to get them to where we need them to go.
Oftentimes the question is a skill or is a will thing? So Adam just talked about the will part. The skill part is oftentimes is what's overlooked, that sometimes the smallest things to check that box is just what you say or what you don't say. And the more that people are informed, the more empowered they feel to do even more. So I think that's the other part of it. It's just shrinking the identification of the change needed and understanding that it is done in increments and that we're not expecting people to take these broad leaps and jumps overnight.
Yeah, I know people want to have some kind of epiphany moment in these meetings, or people want to see that as though it is some kind of fairy tale. But there's a lot of hard work to be done here, and I suspect the chief diversity officers and people in agencies know that. And as such, thanks so much for being on the show with us.
Appreciate being a part of your show. Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, agree. Thank you for having us.
You know what goes well with morning coffee? The latest federal technology contracting news. Washington Technology provides a direct line to the contractor executives who need cutting-edge IT systems and solutions to serve the largest customer in the world, the government market. Our expert coverage and analysis fuels strategic decisions around partnering, RFPs, and resource development, enabling WashTech readers to competitively build relationships, bid smartly, and win contracts. Subscribe to Washington Technology today and never miss a technology update again.
Thanks for listening to GovExec Daily. Our show was produced by Adam Butler and hosted by me, Ross John Fortune. We want to thank Kevin Johnson and Adam Jones for joining the program today. Our music is the song Signals by Catfish Dancing. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or anywhere you get your podcasts. You can email us any feedback at podcast@govexec.com or hit us up on Twitter @govexec. Check us out on Facebook or LinkedIn by searching for Government Executive. We'd love to hear from you. We'll talk to you later.